where we have sample tests for GRE as well as MCAT practice and things like that. So those are free tools that you can use. I also recommend Googling a couple of test prep companies like Kaplan and Princeton Review and things like that. They generally have free events where you can take the test for free. Now you have to remember they're trying to sell you test prep software. So they're definitely going to hit you with the sales pitch, but you still are able to take the test for free and kind of see where you stand. It is going to be important for you to find out when the test is offered and how you sign up for it. So again, the GRE is offered in a lot of places. You can get it pretty much all over. You actually can also take the GRE from home now. So there's a lot of opportunities to get that taken care of. It's not the same for the DAT or the MCAT. Those are only provided at certain days, and you have certain deadlines in which you need to sign up for those. So when I'm talking with students, a lot of times they are kind of worried about some of these standardized tests. So they might say, what if I bomb it? Like, how important is this test to my candidacy? It kind of depends on the school, but for the most part, what I would say is if the school is requiring the test, then they are looking at that as a piece of information. Overall, we want your application to be very holistic. We want all parts of it to be strong. If something goes bad on the GRE, then we have to make up for that in a different area. So if you're not doing well in the GRE, then we need to, number one, make sure that you have really good grades. But then number two, we might need to have more experience hours than somebody else or more leadership than somebody else so that you can kind of make up for that. Okay. Other questions students ask me, can I apply if I don't meet all the criteria at the time of application? The easy answer to that is sometimes. Most of the time you can still apply, even if you haven't met all of the criteria. The important thing is that it has to be completed by the time you would matriculate. So if you are applying right now for a program that starts next fall, as long as you would meet all of those expectations by next fall, you would still be able to apply. From a competitive standpoint, obviously, they're going to be looking at other people who maybe have completed everything. So that's where you have to kind of think about, do I want to take a gap year so that I can turn it in with everything put together? I don't think it's the worst idea in the world to apply, even if you don't have everything, just from the perspective of doing it once really helps you understand how to do it again. But particularly the med school application process is prohibitively expensive. So you have to be ready for that. We talked about this already. Okay. One of the other things then is that most schools will ask for is observation hours. So those schools generally are looking for what we would consider to be diverse experiences. So even less than number of hours, they're looking for you to have different experiences. So if there's a candidate that comes in and says, I have 40 job shadowing hours with one physician, it's actually less impressive than somebody who comes in and says, I have 20 hours of observation in 5 different areas. And when you think about that, we also want those areas to kind of think about working with different populations, people who are different from you. So anytime you can do some observation in a place where maybe they serve a lot of people, low income or poverty or ethnically diverse, that's all going to be helpful for you in saying that you have kind of that diverse experience. We also would say you want to try to get observation hours that are inpatient, outpatient, just so that looks a little bit different. Some schools will not give you a recommended number of hours. In fact, most medical schools don't give you a recommended number of observation hours that you need to have. So in that case, you know, we would say maybe shoot for a minimum of like 40 hours. Again, like I talked about with PA, a lot of times they want you to shadow a PA for just a couple of hours, but then they want a ton of direct patient care experience. You're definitely going to want to keep records of where you go and for how long. And in my office, I just have a simple Excel spreadsheet that I can send you if you email me. It's called a job shadow log. That's just going to give you like, this is where I went. This is the number of hours I went. This is who supervised me. And if you're really on your toes, you'll bring that paper with you and you'll have that person sign it, because most of these programs now do want you to upload verification that you did the hours that you said that you did. So if you're keeping track of that, then that's a very easy upload. Part of your observation hours also can help you identify a professional who might write you a letter of recommendation. So we're going to talk about letters here in the next slide. But a lot of times these schools, if someone who is a current practicing professional in your field of study can write you a letter of recommendation, they really like that. When you're thinking about your letters of recommendation, we definitely would recommend that at least one of those would be from a faculty member in your department. And a lot of times I think our students actually usually have 2 instructors write those for them. If you are having 2 instructors and they're from the same area, so for example, it's like 2 biology instructors, then I generally recommend that you kind of talk to them about the areas that you want them to focus on. We don't want your 2 biology instructors to say the exact same thing about you. We want it to be a little bit different. So you might say to one instructor, hey, can you talk about how I have been as a student in your class and how I've done, academically, whereas the other one maybe talks about how you've been in the lab or how you've done in a research setting or things like that. So those sound a little bit different. Other sources for your letter of recommendation can be coaches, staff, advisors, employment supervisors, or professionals in your field. The important thing about letters of recommendation is you do need to ask people if they feel like they can write you a strong letter of recommendation. That is different than just asking someone if they would be willing to write you a letter, okay? You don't want anybody writing a letter for you who doesn't feel really jazzed and excited about writing that letter, because it will show through in the letter. So you would approach them, you would say, do you feel like you can write me a really strong letter of recommendation? If they kind of pause or they stammer a little bit and they're like, well, I don't know, then it's probably best for you to find someone else to write that letter. You do also want to waive your right to see the letter. In most centralized systems, you actually, all you do is you enter your recommender's contact information and they send them everything so that you never even see that letter. And that's what generally you're going to waive your right to see that letter. Okay. But do make sure that you follow the directions that are in the application. Again, I would ask your recommenders ahead of time. I would provide them a copy of your graduate school resume so that they know everything that you have done. And I would give them a lot of lead time for when that recommendation is due, keeping in mind the academic calendar. So approaching your instructor on December 5th, right when we're getting ready to go into finals week, is not a good time to ask them to write a letter. So thinking about what those timeframes are and when you're going to have your best chance for success. Most programs will also ask you to write a personal statement. Unless directed and you're given a specific guideline, we usually would recommend that your personal statement would be 2 pages double spaced. Some programs will give you a specific word or character count. The personal statement is really a way for the admissions committee to get to know you more as a person. All the information that you put into your application is helping them understand who you are as a student or a candidate. But this personal statement is a way for them to get to know you a little bit more personally. So you're going to include information in that letter that is probably not going to be throughout the rest of your application. It's more personal in nature like that. If you have a prompt, obviously you want to follow the prompt. If you don't have a prompt, then we kind of have a couple of statements that we would recommend that you would include. Why do you want to pursue a career in this area? From this perspective, you want to talk about why you're interested in that career area, and you want to try and make it the least cliche that you can, okay? So saying things like, I want to be a doctor because I really want to help people. There's a lot of ways you can help people and not be a doctor. There's probably a lot easier ways you can help people and not become a doctor. So talking specifically about why being a physician is the right area for you. If you have considered other areas, a lot of times I'll recommend that students actually talk about that. Say like, I actually thought I wanted to be a dentist my whole life. And then this happened and it made me pivot and think about this differently. And now I want to do this. And this is how I know I want to do this. Personal statement. The other questions that you might add into those things, you know, what kinds of things have you done to pursue your goals? What kind of challenges have you overcome in your life and what have you learned from those? Students generally who go to medical or professional school are high achieving and have had great success in the classroom and other areas. Sometimes they're not used to failure. And medical schools want to make sure that if you flunk your first test, you're going to stick with it. You're not going to leave because you're frustrated. So how did you overcome some of those challenges? What are your future career plans? What are you planning to do with that degree area? And if you're not doing a centralized system, then why specifically you want to go to that college or university? If you're doing a centralized system, your personal statement goes to everybody. So obviously you would leave that off that time. Personal statement tips, if you can be specific to the college or university, centralized application systems, you can't do that. Remember your audience. Like this is not only, everybody thinks of the application process as like, oh, I'm trying to get in. I want them to like me. I'm trying to get in. But this really is a mutual process. And you should also be selling yourself and learning more about the college because it really is kind of a two-way street. The personal statement is more about getting to know you as a person and not necessarily a laundry list of your accomplishments. So talking a lot about things that you've thought about, personal things to you. Some students in the past have talked about people who have passed away, who have been close to them, or maybe experiencing some sort of serious medical crisis. All kinds of things so that they can get to know you better and kind of what your motivation is. They are evaluating this, so you want to make sure that it's free from errors. And they see a lot of these. So we need to make sure that you're not just writing a kind of run-of-the-mill letter. We want it to be interesting. We want you to think about how you can start it and end it in an interesting fashion. So maybe you start it with a quote, or you talk about a movie you saw, or you give a specific example, just so that it helps kind of be a little bit more interesting. Research on your application should be individual and original research, which means the research that everyone did as a class in your one class really shouldn't count. If that's all you got, then that's what you got to go with. But we're looking for research that you have done either by approaching your instructor or your instructor approached you, maybe that you presented at Palmer, if you did a summer undergraduate research experience. Those are the kinds of research that we're talking about. If you've been a research assistant to a professor or preceptor, things like that. If you don't have that individual research, you can still talk about other research that you have done. Most professional schools are looking for students who not only have done research, but understand the value that research brings. So you want to let them know that you have that.